I think the cave for me is those values, those beliefs that I grew up with, and I never really questioned. I mean, there was never really like a reason for me to question them, and then I started taking like your classes, and I realized that like I started asking questions, and which I think is the most important thing. Like I was asking myself, like, okay, why do I believe this? I mean, why are my values shaped like this? And I realized that you become your own enemy when you become narrow-minded. And so it's just been great. And I think that exposing myself to other people and just looking at people and seeing like the different perspectives on things, it broadens the horizons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Brett?
I think it's a strong metaphor for human nature. I mean, when you think about it, human flaws and human potential, really. Because whether you like to admit it or not, some people want to stay in the cave. It's safer there in the cave.
Mm-hmm.
They want to stick to the shadows that they've known, regardless of whether or not that they are really true or not. Regardless of whether or not they see the light coming down through the cave, maybe they want to stay there because it's safer. And there are those who climb up to the top, who struggle to see what is out there, what is to be known. But at the same time, everybody just can't truck forward all the time. When you get up there to the top, just like in the story, you're taken back. You see things that you've never known before, maybe realize things you've never realized before.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something that can just be entered into immediately. It's something that, whenever there's a self-discovery, people step back. They go, whoa,
Mm-hmm.
For a second they stop and they think and they take back. Because none of us can really just snap our fingers and jump into self-realization. It doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I think about it, I put on my own spin as in we're always in a cave. We're always climbing up into this new area, this new existence. It's that eternal struggle. Because if you think that you have reached self-realization, then you're never going to get there. Because you're going to stop. And it's the journey, it's the struggle that brings realization. It's not that there's an end point or that you finally reach enlightenment.
I think that's an interesting point. Plato told a version of this story 2,500 years ago in the Republic. It was a story of epistemology. But it's this idea of becoming and this idea of knowledge, how we come to know things. And one of the things that we talk about in the colleague program in the minor in applied leadership studies is the fact that the best leaders are self-aware. They understand the complexity of the self. They understand the shadows. They understand their motives. They understand their fears. And our goal in the program is to develop students into thoughtful practitioners. We don't want students just to be reactionary leaders that just know how to do something. We want them to know why and how the relationship of their dispositions, the relationship of who they are and the broad breadth of just experiences that they've had in their lives, how those affect the way that they behave and ultimately the way that they lead. Do you guys have any thoughts about that?
The first word that springs to mind is when you're talking about knowing yourself and not being a reactionary leader is context. Every great leader is a great leader because of the situation he or she is in, I think. Whether or not they're made from that is debatable. But if you don't know yourself, if you don't know your strengths and your weaknesses, you will never know when it is your time to step up and lead because you don't know your context. You don't know how you are most capable. And I think that that's one thing that I didn't realize before I started this. I thought that anybody could lead in any situation, which some people can. I mean, maybe that's their talent. But a lot of times you have to know not only yourself, but you have to know the situation, how you work best in that situation.
And I think the scariest part for people is realizing that they're in the cave and looking up and seeing that light, no matter how dim that it is, that there is something more. And I want us to spend some time talking about the ascent out of the cave. And one of the things we talk about in the colleague program is the fact that the ascent out of the cave begins by asking tough questions about ourselves. Who am I? Why am I here? What really matters in life? What is success to me? How does the relationship of my past affect how I am today and how I treat other people? And it's a tough journey. I don't think there's anything more scary for us than facing ourselves, looking at ourselves as though in a mirror. What do you guys think?
I mean, that is the toughest part, you know, is the self-realization, the realization that you are in a cave. I mean, someone great once said that true knowledge is to know the extent of one's own ignorance. So without knowing, you know, where your boundaries are, that where you're ignorant of, like, you can never realize anything. And sometimes it's hard for people to admit that they have a flaws. And that goes into great leadership. Great leaders have their flaws, and they know what they are. And it is the knowledge of where you're ignorant and where you can improve, and the knowledge of where others may help you that strengthens you even more. Because you are relying on the knowledge of others, and you're relying on the knowledge of yourself. So it's not just you standing there alone. It's an entire group, you know, an entire group lifting you up.
And you said the idea of others helping, and that's a good segue into one of the ways that we've talked about that a person can come out of the cave, and that is by finding dream starters. A lot of times there are dream stealers in our lives, whether they be parents, they be teachers, they be employers, all kinds of people that remind us of our limitations rather than helping us to see who we really are, to see our potential, to identify what Aristotle would call our entelechies. And so the idea is that to identify people who are dream starters, who see who we could become. What do you think, Corey, would make a good dream starter?
Well, I think, and this is just something that came to mind, that even to look at dream starters and dream stealers, you're not looking only at people. I think organizations can play a huge part in being a dream starter or a dream stealer. Like different church groups or I think can act as both. So I think that to be good at either is to embrace it. It doesn't always just have to be one person. It can be a collective. Like I know at my high school there was a group of people that I identified closely with, and it wasn't just one person. It was a lot of people that were inspiring, that were open, that were accepting, and encouraged. Not everything that I said, because not everything I said was a good idea, but they realized the good ideas in me, and they realized the potential, and they encouraged it. And I think that was a huge part in helping me know that I could do some of the things that I wanted to do.
Every person on this planet needs to have at least someone or a context that helps that person see not just where they are or where they've been, but what they can become and where they can go. And it's so important. It's so important. Another thing that we talked about on the colleague program when we were talking about self-awareness is the fact that not only are dream starters important, but also the idea of reflection. The reflection is part of the meaning-making process. And that's very hard for us in our lifestyle. We are constantly on the go. We're constantly moving from one thing to the next. When we usually introduce ourselves to someone, the next question they ask is, what do you do? And there's nothing wrong with action. But a lot of times we sacrifice reflection and truly knowing who we are. And as a result of that, it's hard to make changes. It's hard to begin that ascent out of the cave when we don't have time or take the time to really ponder things, ponder the tough questions. We've got about 30 seconds left, and I would like to open this up to Adiri. If you were looking at self-awareness and you had to communicate to someone why you think that it's important for effective leadership, what would you say?
I would say that self-awareness reflection is the only way for you to know if you're progressing, if you're going in the direction of your goals, because if you do not have time to reflect, you might not know the direction you're going to. And you might get to the point and realize that I went to the wrong place because I wasn't taking time out to discover, is this what I want for myself, or is this what the collective, the world, the people, the mouth of the world wants for me? So I think that reflection is very important.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to thank you for joining us on this first edition of the Leadership Link. We're going to show this program once a month and give you a chance to learn about what we're doing in the very exciting Welch Colleague program at the University of Charleston. Thank you.
Yeah, that I'll be living for better days.
Okay,
I know,
yeah.
said I know, yeah. I'm gonna be living for better days. What the future holds, I know. I'm gonna be living for better days.